Hey guys, I'm Fancy.
And I'm Colleen.
And this is Murder by Design. And welcome back to Murder by Design. And tonight we are updating on Tiger King.
Finally. Got some updates happening, and there's been a lot of new updates in the news. Carole was just granted Joe Exotic's property.
Like, what the hell is that?
But,
how did that even happen?
He owes her money, and I guess maybe
that Jeff guy had it, right? Like, did he just...
Is Jeff in jail? I don't know. I don't know what the issues. Maybe he was sick and tired of caring for over 200 tigers. I don't really know.
Well, I never thought that he was interested in caring for tigers in the first place. That guy just wanted to frickin' screw around with tigers and act all badass and take them into frickin' casinos and act like an idiot and make some money. I don't think he ever had any intention of actually taking care of tigers.
Well, I'm concerned about now Carole owning it. And the tigers, because she's a piece of garbage with her tigers and making all of her people work slave hours with no pay.
Well, I don't even know how that's going to work. Like,
right, she's going to move half of her stuff out there, or she's going to move everything. I mean, her property is dumpy.
I've not been to either place. Okay, let me make that clear. I've never been to either one. But from what I saw on the documentary, and we all know that everything can be, distorted and look different, and how you shoot it makes things look. But I'm gonna tell you what, I thought that his sanctuary looked way, way better for the tigers than hers. And she's talking about the tiny cages that they are in, and at hers looked like this big, and his looked like that. I don't know. I thought
her tigers and her, big cats have to stick their heads through little tiny boxes to drink, and they're in this small space. Joe's got massive tigers, and all of them look very well fed.
Yes,
and they have room to roam.
Yeah,
they've got able to run and chase and jump and climb, and so that's craziness that's happening now. It feels like 2020 is out of control at this point.
I don't know. All I can tell you is I don't think there's any good person in this story.
No.
There was no one that I was like, well, wow, that's a good... No. There was not a single person that I was like, oh, I care about that person. Like, you watch something and you want to care about people. I cared about the animals, for sure. Yeah. For sure cared about the animals. And I was like, is anybody care about these animals? Because it didn't seem like that was anybody's concern at all, were the animals, I
think my concerns for the people involved were Don Lewis, but I don't like how they started, so I'm not a huge fan of him, but I don't think he deserved to die. Joe's second husband, who killed himself. Like, yes, addicted to drugs, but I feel like Joe kind of preyed on him, and
now there's this third husband, Dylan, who's been standing by his side while he's in prison. But I did see an article today about something about how Joe would want him to go and move on and be happy on his own. So I don't know what's going on there either. But anyway, for tonight, we are going to be doing some updates with several different people over the course of the next couple of weeks. So you're going to want to keep tuning in. We will have updates from Cheryl McCollum, who is the founder of the Cold Case Research Institute. You saw her on here a couple nights ago talking about the George Floyd case and the rioting and all of that. And we're going to continue on with those with Stephen David Lampley, who was, an SVU detective and a part of the riot team in Alabama for a long time. And we'll be talking with our favorite death investigator, Joseph Scott Morgan, because
love his voice. We have him on all the time because obviously there's a medical component to all these crime cases.
And he's so knowledgeable. I just love him to death. But we'll have all of them on, and some of them may make appearances on this Tiger King situation. But tonight we're really excited because tonight we're going to actually be looking at something that's a little more less opinionated and much more factual in exactly what we're looking at. So we'll be talking tonight with Thomas Vastrick, who is a forensic handwriting expert. So basically what he's going to do is talk about the signatures that are on the power of attorney and the will, and we'll be hearing about that from him as to what exactly are we looking at with those signatures that have now been, allegedly looked at as possible, forgeries or tracings, and what that really does mean tonight. So we're very excited to have him join us tonight.
And we also talk slight snippet about Zodiac Killer, BTK, touch on Robert Durst a little bit, and even voter registration and voter fraud.
Right, which is a hot topic right now that we're all very concerned about. No matter what side you're on about it, I know that it is in the hearts and minds of many Americans right now, and worrying about, how will the election go down this year. So we're really excited about all of this. We've got a great show for you guys, so stay tuned.
So hi, Thomas.
Hello.
So I'm Colleen. Obviously that's fancy. Can you tell our listeners who you are and kind of what you do?
Well, my name is Tom Vastrick, and I am what's known as a forensic document examiner. Forensic document examination is a discipline within the forensic sciences. We are one of 11 disciplines that are part of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. Our profession dates back to the 1800s, but really got their kind of groundbreaking experience in the Lindbergh baby kidnapping case. That's when our work became fairly prominent, although probably a much earlier case that involved forensic document examination was a Vanderbilt estate.
Yes. And so I was kind of like looking at it, different, ways that forensic analyzing has been going on through history. I think they even did some with like Queen Elizabeth I, and she translated stuff, and so I get it goes back a long time.
Oh, if you want to go way back historically, you can go back to the laws of Justinian, back around the 5th century, which talks about forgery as a crime, and that's why back in the Middle Ages they had these wax rings that were used to seal documents. That was their form of signature. So signature is a security issue, goes back many, many, many centuries.
Are signatures like fingerprints?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Are signatures like fingerprints?
They are, to the extent that they're unique to individuals, and the examination of them are related because they both fall under what's called pattern recognition.
Right.
So a lot of times in like big trials, big cases, a lot of the forensic scientists kind of get labeled as like junk science, and that people want to discredit it, that maybe it shouldn't be allowed in court. Can you say what kind of training is needed and why it is valid science?
Well, the training for forensic document examiners normally over a period of 24 months, if it's done full time. It can be done on a part-time basis over a course of about 4 years and still stay within the standards of our training as they're published. But you bring up kind of a complicated issue because, number one, there are legitimate forensic scientists and there are some that I wouldn't so much as label as legitimate, that are claiming themselves to be that way. And that said, there's also the issue of when there's new technologies or different technologies that are being offered in court. that there is legitimate questions sometimes that come up about their reliability as far as how well they've been tested, what their error rates are. And so there could sometimes be legitimate questions of legitimate forensic scientists as far as a specific type. And then I would say a much larger category of situations in which you're dealing with court contentions that it's a junk science. It's because that one side or the other doesn't want the evidence coming in because it's devastating to them.
Right. Yep. Right. So there's been 2 huge cases that have been cracked with handwriting analysis, and one of them is one that's kind of coming back around right now, and that's Robert Durst. And then the BTK killer, Dennis Rader, obviously. So in Durst's case, it was handwriting on notes compared to his official documents, like taxes, and then like how he misspells the words and stuff. So would you have agreed that he was, that those notes were valid and that he really did, have some culpability in the cases that he's been brought up on based on handwriting?
I'm going to withhold comment on Durst matters because I have had some involvement.
Oh, okay.
And so,
we didn't know that. So
just to protect any issue,
yeah.
I probably won't because my involvement's been very small.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I'd prefer just to stay away from that subject.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But so with BTK, obviously it's a little bit of an older case. I think he really did himself in, and his kind of not specifically used handwriting, but more his digital kind of encryption at the time. For our listeners, he was very arrogant in like communicating with media and the police, and he gave him a floppy disk. For all of you young listeners, look up what a floppy disk is.
Oh, I know what a floppy disk is. I'm sure Thomas knows what a floppy disk is.
And he had told the cops that, and they had promised him that they weren't going to trace it, and I can't believe he fell for it. And the cops, when they looked at it, under the property section, it had where the file had last been saved, and it came back for his church and for his local library because he had made the floppy disk at the church where he was one of the prominent members in the church. And then he went to the library to print it because his home computer printer wasn't working. And obviously they Googled or internet searched him, found it.
Google wasn't around back then.
I know. Kelly. I was like, World Wide Web, dial up, bring it up.
That was what you heard as you did.
So, do you think without kind of the forensic document examiner, he would have been caught?
Well, I think a case like that is more the digital forensics. That would have to do with that case. I think a more compelling case for document examination along those lines would be the Zodiac Killer from San Francisco. That was more directly a document examination type case.
Which we still have not been able to crack that code. However,
yes,
I've heard people that think that they have. So,
what do you think?
The police examiner, Lloyd Cunningham, presented at a national conference that they had found who he considered to be the Zodiac Killer. And it was a person who had passed away by the time that they had identified him.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a friend, Ann Penn, who believes, though, that that's not the correct way either. She believes that there is a connection between the Zodiac Killer and the Golden State Killer. She's done a lot of research on it, and it could go that way. I've seen some of the stuff that she's done. It's very compelling, but it's such an odd case. And that during that time period, there was a lot going on. So
I lived through some of that at the time that he was known as the East Area Rapist.
Right.
I was going to school in Sacramento, so I lived through that. I was in the area where it was happening. And to tell you that it changed society just as much as our current pandemic is.
Yes.
Life completely changed during that period because of that. So, regardless of how long it took, I'm glad they nailed the person.
I am too. I lived through being in California during the Night Stalker years, and the same thing. It changed how we in our homes felt. We used to leave our windows open a crack to get some, fresh air at night when we slept, and that all stopped, and people, locked their doors, and things changed again during that time period too. Like you said, it changed the way things happen. But we brought you here today because there's a case that has gotten some popular, pop culture obsessed people, and that is the Tiger King Joe Exotic case, and it's brought some light to something else that I think maybe Carole Baskins wasn't expecting, and that's the cold case of Don Lewis, and it's been brought into the spotlight. So you got a chance to look at the documents, correct?
Yes, there's a durable power of attorney and a will. Both dated November of 1996.
Right.
And they were both notarized by the same person, witnessed by the same two people, and signed by Jack Lewis, allegedly.
Right. So now, and I know that you've talked about the power of it. Well, I think it was Joseph Fritz that talked about the power of attorney being even more important than probably the will. Because the power of attorney was what allowed her to go ahead and transfer all of the money, because at the time he was still considered, living. He hadn't been considered, as a dead person yet. It takes 5 years down there to get a person, legally declared deceased. So she was able to move everything based on that power of attorney, not even the will. Now you've seen both, and you believe that both documents were you don't like the word forgery, but you said that they were traced and that they are not a legal signature. Yes.
Well, yes, they're traced based on a signature from his marriage record that had been issued 5 years earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't use the word forgery because as document examiners, we deal strictly with whether in this case, whether Mr. Lewis actually signed the document or not. I don't address the issue of whether there was an intent to defraud, or whether there was permission to sign it. For instance, I could sign my wife's checks, sign them in her name and deposit it, and I've not committed forgery, but I wrote her name on it.
Sure. I've done that as a married couple. I've done that many times for my husband when, there was something like that we needed done and he wasn't available, and he said, just sign it for me, So that's the difference in what you determine as a forgery or not, is the intent to defraud. Yes?
Yeah, I don't address intent. All I address is whether it was a legitimate signature, in this case, Mr. Lewis, or not.
Well, so what you have talked about is that the signatures on both documents are straight up identical, that somebody would be tracing it, right?
Well, now we got to differentiate just a little bit. I didn't say identical. I said near identical. Because if you have identical, it can be a rubber stamp.
Right. Sure.
That's the type, or signature transfer, and that would cause absolutely identical, because what you are having is copies of the actual same signature.
Right.
Sure.
Tracing is where it's near exact replication, and in this case, that is absolutely exactly what you have. And the only legitimate possibility of all the possibilities is that it's a product of tracing.
Okay, and so tell us a little bit about how you come to that determination of traced, and what it is that you're looking for when you're making a determination like that.
In tracings, you're going to have size and proportions that match almost perfectly. So what I do is I put the different signatures under over a light box. So I could see through one page to another page and cross-compared them by name. You might get a little spacing difference, because a lot of times in tracing, a person will do one name at a time and will make a few adjustments. So like if there's a spacing difference between the first and last name, that doesn't bother me that much. or some sort of slight alignment difference. But as I set the signatures on top of the light box and then on top of each other, I can overlay them to the point where you can't see pretty much any difference between them. And that immediately ticks off a red flag in my head. We got issues here. And that's an early part of the examination, is to conduct a review of the question writing. And the purpose of that is to determine what are our possibilities.
Right.
So when I did that examination in this case, right off the bat, the first thing that came up is I may be dealing with a tracing here. So I have to get a number of sample signatures. And then I would also tell the person submitting the documents to me is, do you have any idea of where the person that you might suspect would have done this would have had access to a person's signature? Now, in a husband and wife situation, they're going to have access to tons of the signatures. So you may not be able to find the model signature, but a lot of times you can't find the model signature if there's a limited relationship between the person that you suspected a tracing and the victim in the case. In this case, it was just, frankly, it was dumb luck. They presented the marriage license record to me, and I was able to make the determination that was the model signature because it also matched up exactly. It was an excellent document to have because it was 5 years older. It was when they first got married, so you're comparing that to two documents in which you have a husband and wife relationship. So the vetting of that document having existed prior to the will and the power of attorney was excellent.
Right.
So because all of those factors kind of fell into place, it made it pretty, I don't want to say easy, but elementary to be able to make the assessment that the signature from the marriage record was the model signature that was used to create the Lewis signatures on the power of attorney and the will. So
now, you were able to determine definitely with Jack Don Lewis's signature, but you've also said that there was another signature that you could confirm that you felt was as well traced. You said there were 3 and 2 at least you knew were. So how were you able to make that second determination? Well, the second determination, I did not have any model signature. We had signatures of 3 other people, the notary, who signed as notary on both documents and as a witness on one of the documents, which is legal. Right. And then we had 2 other people that signed as witnesses. So each of those 3 people had 3 signatures themselves on these 2 documents. Okay. So I did the same overlay test for all 3 of these people, and in each and every instance, I found the near exact replication and the ability to overlay, which tells me that I am also dealing with the product of tracing. The problem, since I don't have the model signatures, theoretically, I have to accept the possibility that one of those 3 signatures could be the model signature. I can't say based on examining a copy, so all I can say at this point is 2 of them are traced. At least. Right. No,
that makes sense. Yeah,
no, because it makes sense because, every time I sign something, it doesn't always look exactly the same. I mean, it's similar. You would look at it and know it's my signature, right? But every time you would look at it and go, okay, well, here's where she did this differently or she did that differently. So you would have differences in the signature. If every signature looks exactly the same, then yeah, I can see where you're coming to that conclusion, that you're tracing something, because obviously, even if it's a day later or even, a minute later from what I'm doing, signing and signing and signing, if I'm signing several documents at one time, you can see the progression of how my signature gets less and less precise as I go along signing things, I used to be a retail manager and we had to sign reports at the end of the night, and I ended up developing this signature that was just like a little F with a thing around it, and now my kids, they can knock off my signature in seconds, when I was went through a period of time where I was on this medication that was very hard for me to wake up in the mornings, and my kids would come in and say things to me and, Mom, I need your signature on this. And I was like, just sign it. because I couldn't, I can understand what they were saying, but I was not awake enough to be able to hold a pen and, sign it. So I was just like, tell me what it is. Okay, just sign it. So I can totally understand where that would happen, but if you're seeing that exact replica of 3 signatures that look exactly the same, then
almost exactly
the same. Yes, exactly. Right.
I'll get you, Tom. Well, so, and I'm the young one of our cohort, and my dad and I have near the same handwriting, and always have ever since I learned to write. Everyone always remarked that my handwriting is almost the same as my dad's. So in maybe some elementary school, and for sure middle and high school, I would always forget to bring stuff to class, signed permission slips, maybe some bad report cards. And so I would text my dad off my flip phones and be like, can I sign your name here? And be like, yeah, sure. And
well, funny story. The one time that I got in trouble for something like that was a time where I had not forged my mother's signature. I had not done anything wrong. It was a situation where I was very sick that day, but I knew I had a test that I couldn't make up. So my mom signed for me to get in at a certain time and get back out at a certain time. And so I was walking to school, and I walked up there, and I took my time getting up there. And by the time I got near the school, I sat down on one of those great big, like, electrical boxes that run the lights, because I was winded and I wasn't feeling well. And I sat down. Well, this campus aide came across, and she was like, what are you doing? You're ditching. I'm like, I have a note, and she's like, I don't believe you. So she hauled me in, and she hauled me into the dean, and he was very angry. And I said, I need to call my mom. He wouldn't let me call my mom. And he's like, you go to OCS, which is like on-campus suspension. I was like, no, I have to take this test. He's like, no, you go to OCS. I'm like, I'm calling my mom. He's like, you're not calling your mom. Ended up, I walked off and I went to the pay phone, because we didn't have phones at this time. So we didn't have, flip phones or text phones. We had pay phones. So I went to the pay phone, and he's yelling at me in the background, and he's like, I told you to go to OCS. I said, well, I told you I was calling my mom. And so I told my mom what was happening, and she worked about 10 minutes away, but my mom had a souped up Mustang. And within, I'm telling you, 2.5 minutes, you heard my mom, and I looked at him, I said, that is my mom, and you are in so much trouble right now. And so my mom gets out of the car, she comes up and she screams, she goes, you go to class. And I'm like, but I said go to class. I'm like, okay, I'm going. So I went, and you literally could hear my mom screaming at that man across campus. And you look at me, I am 5'2". I was teeny tiny. My mom is 5'11", and she is a big woman. And this was a tiny, tiny little Hispanic man. He came up to her chest. She walked up and towered over him, and I swear his demeanor changed completely. After that, all I ever had to say was, I'm going to call my mom. And everyone was like, no, don't call your mom.
Look at Todd. I'm going to tell my mom.
That was so funny, because it was the one time I hadn't done that, where, like Colleen said, I had always asked my mom, hey, can I just sign this? Yeah, go ahead. Or if I knew it wasn't anything that mattered, I would do it. But that was the one time I didn't, and it didn't work out for them.
So with the tracing, do you feel that information can be beneficial for law enforcement, or prosecutors, defense attorneys, something? Do you think it is noteworthy for them?
Noteworthy, possibly, but it's going to be a very limited value. The forgery is a class 3 felony in Florida, and the statute of limitations run out for that. The only value it could potentially have would be for motive, but you don't have any evidence. Motive is worthless, and
Right.
and even the motive part of it's kind of iffy.
I think that Netflix at least gave it the attention that about Joe Exotic and about his feud with Carole, and then Carole's issues with her love life and her weird current husband, but
Weird other name.
it's
They're all
weird dynamic. But I think it helped at least bring some light to the media and for the public to know. And I think it probably has definitely hurt her, at least socially, even if, and it gave the family, I think, a little bit more notice that people care and want to see some justice for them. And even if they can't get that justice through the justice system, at least there's some sort of, the public has declared it, guilt. But
did you find anything else odd besides just looking at the handwriting? Did you look at the documents themselves and find anything in the wording or anything else that you would consider odd?
Well, there's oddities in the wording, but that goes past the work I do. So I try to avoid that because that's usually a potentially biasing issue.
Sure.
But after the examination and during other interviews that I've been involved in, I've been involved in interviews where Mr. Lewis's attorney has also been involved in them and heard several things of interest. For instance, a power of attorney talking about that if you're missing is kind of strange. And I will say I see a lot of power of attorneys, and I've never seen that in one before. But beyond that, I have no comment. I'm not a legal expert, so that means anything.
Right.
The other issue that was brought up there, and you kind of touched on it, is potentially you have no forgery on the will legally, because it was my understanding that all of the asset transfers were done under the power of attorney.
Sure.
And if that's the case, then there was no intent to defraud, because there was no ability to defraud, because there was no estate left once Mr. Lewis was declared dead. So I don't even know if the will got probated.
Right.
If it didn't get probated, then it's not legally a forgery.
Right. Well, it doesn't, I think it's negated because she did everything beforehand, but it doesn't take away the fact that the document that, the power of attorney could have been an actual, true forgery. In the fact that could have been intent for her to take all the assets, so.
I think it'll help play in with, like you said, other experts and
I think there's been six experts, or we up to 6 or 7 now, that have confirmed that this is a traced document or not an official signature.
I've heard reference to one. I've not heard anything about the others, and frankly, in my position, I don't care.
Right. Your opinion is this, and whatever somebody else.
Right, you're an expert. So.
Right.
I'm not trying to sign flip it. It's just that, I gotta maintain an objective distance from everything. I've never even watched one episode of the show.
It's like watching Jerry Springer.
Did you know what you were getting into when you got asked to look at these documents? I wonder now.
A little bit, because I hear snippets from people about this, and I heard the name Carole Baskins come up a couple times, and I'm going, well, who's this?
Right.
And then I see this picture of Tony Tiger that says Carole Baskins' husband tasted great, and I'm going, what's this all about? I had no knowledge about.
Well, I'll tell you, I tried to avoid it for as long as I could, much to Colleen's dismay. I kept trying to put it off and put it off and put it off and put it off, but then more and more people that we are involved with, got involved in the situation of looking into the cold case. And so then I was like, all right, fine. And I'll tell you, that is the craziest thing I've ever watched in my life. It is. I grew up on Jerry Springer and Sally Jesse and all of those, and I've never seen anything like that documentary. And it was like each episode just got crazier and crazier. I was like, how? Surely we're going to get to the peak here and this is going to go down, right? No.
Well, I'm the person, I DVR Steve Wilkos and Maury and Jerry Springer. Like, I like watching that kind of, it makes me feel better about my life. So
train wreck, that's for sure.
Well, exactly. It just makes me feel good about my life. And I'm like, I guess it's not that my life is actually quite normal.
So what do you think happens after this? So do you think this will come into play in any real way, or do you expect that you'll be called if something does go forward, Thomas?
I will not get called.
You will not get called.
If it comes to that, and if there comes to any, at this point, anything short of murder, you have statute of limitations problems. So if it was to ever come up, it'd have to be in a murder trial. If it's a murder trial down here in Florida, they're going to send the evidence to the FDLE, Florida Department of Law Enforcement Laboratory, to do the official examination, and a representative from the FDLE lab in Pensacola will be the one who will testify.
I see.
Makes sense.
So just now you've just looked at it just for informational sake, for them to kind of go forward and see where to go with this, but you won't be involved.
I was initially requested by some media, a newspaper in Tampa and another newspaper in Jackson, Mississippi, to look at it for them. And that's who I did it for. I did it pro bono. I didn't charge anything to do it.
Right. Well, we appreciate you coming on today. Is there another case that you've been on that's been pretty noteworthy, that this was something that you really did, your expertise really helped in?
Probably, but I can't think of it off the top of my head right now. I mean, I've been doing this for 43 years, and I know one of the problems I face when I testify is that I'm so focused on the case that I'm testifying on that if I get asked a question about another case, I completely go blank.
Right.
And maybe 5 minutes after we got off this call, it's like, doggone, I should have talked about this case or that case or whatever. Why didn't I think of that?
Right.
You feel the same.
I guess probably the most recent big case, I don't know how much media attention it got in Florida, was I did work for the Secretary of State's office about mail-in ballots. There was a big lawsuit involving mail-in ballots last year after they had a midterm election, and I got involved in that. It was pretty substantial amount of work that had to be done.
I mean, that makes sense, and that's a hot button issue right now. So
it's going to be a higher button issue this year.
Definitely, it's a hot button issue
this year. Stressful.
Do you think there is a case for not having that because of this, something like this?
Well, it's one part of a process. If there's issues with the signature, the normal process is then to contact the voter, and they have a certain amount of time to acknowledge that it was their mail-in ballot, that they are the one that signed it, and then it will count. So it's more than just people looking at the signature and saying, yes, it's similar to the signature on file with their voter registration card or not. And as long as it's just that one step in the entire process, then it's a good idea. But if it was the only step in the process, that would be pretty, I would have concerns over it, because a lot of the signature issues I looked at were like, voter registration card had a printed signature on it. The mail-in ballot had a cursive signature on it, but you can't compare cursive to printed. So by necessity, it would get rejected because it didn't show any sort of right or relationship between the two. But that's a whole lot different than saying they didn't sign it.
Right.
Well, so if it was like, I'm thinking, for people who do, absentee or mail-in ballots, that if the due date for turning in their ballot was far in advance, so that way there was time for people to, in each district, looking at those ballots, then having to call those people and verify yes, no, XYZ, whatever the steps are, but giving it that time versus, okay, here's a week before the election and here's 27 million mail-in ballots.
Right.
I don't really know if they convene the canvassing board before the end of the voting period or not, so they can do that. I don't know the answer to that, but if you want to take effective steps in addressing that, go into the supervisor election office and update your voter registration card.
Sure. Now, so the process, what is the process? So they mail it in, and then there's a person that physically checks it against it, or does it go through a computer system, or how would it get flagged?
Well, all of them are flagged. That's what the canvassing board does, is they will physically compare the signature on the mail-in ballot to the voter registration that they have on file. Now, they could be looking at it on a computer screen or pull the actual card. I guess that would be dependent of the county that they're in, because that's all under county jurisdiction.
Sure.
There would be a one level of canvassing board that would make the decision. If they decided to accept it, that's the end of it. Then it's accepted. If it's rejected, then it goes to the next step, supervisory review. And if they accept it, then it gets accepted, and that's the end of it. If they reject it, like in last year's case, then it came to me, and I reviewed it, and I was the third level on it. And then if it got rejected, as I understand the policy at that point, then is that they would contact the voter.
Wow. So
or they would contact the voter during the first rejection, one or the other.
Sure. It seems like, though, if it was, mail-in and absentee ballots is kept to a minimum at this point. It would seem that if we increase that to be, everyone doing it, it would really be a problem then, I think, for this type of extra, problems with voter fraud. So
yeah, it certainly does raise a problem, because you also have situations where people can pick up a bunch of the ballots and bring them in as a group. Well, who's to know? The one coming in is the one that was picked up. Partisan politics are what they are.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Always have been. It's not something new.
Sure.
Hopefully things kind of get resolved, worked out in advance, so we're not dealing in Wisconsin. So I'm here in Wisconsin. We just had a huge major issue for our primaries. That I had requested my absentee ballot or mail-in ballot, I don't even remember, far in advance, because I'm immunocompromised, so I haven't really been leaving my house. But our governor had pretty much said, like, we're doing mail-in ballots, or we're pushing the date for the elections farther out so people can have time to request them if they want. And then our Supreme Court shot it down, and it left people with like 3-day notice, 1-day notice to go vote. And so our lines for voting were miles long, hours long. And so I think making sure it's worked out in advance is really important if people are, like in my case, have to really vote from my home. Make sure their voter ID and the registration is up to date, and request it in advance, turn it in sooner than later.
Right.
And just be safe.
Well,
I'll just say it again. Go get your voter registration card updated.
Right.
That will avoid most of the problems.
Sure. Well, we thank you, Thomas, for joining us tonight, talking about, Tiger King, Don Lewis, and a couple other things. So it's been a pleasure, and we thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. This was fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Colleen, stay on for a minute, okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Alrighty. He was really cool. I enjoyed speaking with him.
Yeah, it was nice to have like a very more factual person versus opinionated. Like, I love our stuff with Joe. He's great. Yeah. But we definitely get to talk a little bit more about theories and motives with him versus this guy, expert witness. He's like, this is a trace.
This is a trace. There is no question here.
And that's all I'm saying. I'm fascinated about Durst now.
Told you. I didn't know why you are not up on this case. This case is a big freaking case, man.
No, I watched this thing. I'm up to date on it. I didn't know he was involved.
Oh, yeah.
I know he was involved. That's
Yeah, I'd like to know what his involvement is. I mean, I know that those notes have been all over the place. I'm sure. I'm sure they've had tons and tons of, because it took a very long time to prove that those were, in fact, a match.
Well, and they didn't know that they existed for a while.
Yeah.
Those letters and
yeah.
I love that the end of the Jinx was just like,
that guy's cuckoo cuckoo. Let me tell you,
But I understand why they would want him as the expert witness on the trial, because he's very not opinionated. He doesn't give a shit. He's just going to talk about the facts.
So we gave you a lot to think about tonight, guys. We've talked on a lot of different subjects. And in going forward with this, we've told you that we are going to have Cheryl McCollum on, who was part of the investigation into this cold case. And someone that we're really excited about having is a very close personal friend of Dawn's, and that is Joseph Fritz. And he is not only just one of his very good friends, he's an attorney at law that did many of the documents for Mr. Lewis. So he's going to come on and talk about that. He's really going to talk a lot, I know, about the power of attorney, which we kind of touched on a little bit tonight. Yeah?
Yes, so definitely about the wording on that power of attorney, the will, who kind of got what, where they were located, and just getting some background information on Don himself, getting some how Don was versus just Carole's missing husband.
Right.
And so we're going to hear from a lot of people involved in looking at this cold case. Like we said, tonight was a lot of facts, not as many opinions. But going forward, we'll have a little bit more opinion, but dealing with the facts of the case.
And if you are somebody that's involved that we haven't heard from yet, we're hoping to hear from maybe one of the witnesses or friends or family of Don himself. We would love it if you would contact us. You can do so, like we said, at goodwivesdish@gmail.com, and let us know that you'd like to come on and talk about this case, because there are so many questions that people have that I think nobody's been able to answer yet. So I really would love if anybody would reach out and let us know, and we'd be glad to give you your ability to tell your side of the story, even if you are Carole herself.
I'd love to speak to you, Carole.
We would love that, and we will let you have your say. So if you do decide to come on, we will allow you to have your say and tell your side of this whole thing, because I'm sure you'd love to share that with everybody who's judging.
Yep.
Alrighty. Hey guys, so a couple nights ago, we launched a special campaign along with Cheryl McCollum from the Cold Case Research Institute called Love Wins. And what this is it is our answer to all the chaos that's kind of going on right now. The chaos from the riots, the chaos from all the different, pandemic, everything that's happening in our lives right now. All the issues with, the different lost lives that we've had from before the protesting, after the protesting. So all the lost lives that have come out of this, the lost lives of COVID even. And so #LoveWins is a movement to usher in peace, and knowing that above all, the only way that we're going to get through all of this is loving each other. So what we're actually doing here is we are creating a scholarship fund in remembrance of all the lost lives in 2020 so far, and ushering in peace. And this scholarship fund will go to anyone that wants to go ahead and enter to win. The criteria is really cool. All you have to do is make a 30-second video of yourself and explaining to us how you lead with love. And we are looking for college-age students that are, struggling. Maybe they can't get scholarships. Maybe there's a reason, that they aren't available for them, or it's just not enough for them. And so this is our way of helping out. We're hoping to raise about $5,000. If we raise more than that, then we'll look into giving more than one scholarship away. The way that we're doing this is we have some merchandise. It's #LoveWins merchandise. And there's also Lead with Love merchandise. They've got shirts, cups, mugs, stickers, anything you could possibly want. And we're going to have it on a couple different platforms. Currently, we're doing some on TeePublic, but I'm working on some on Cafe Press too, because they have a lot more variety of merchandise. And so we'll be donating a portion of the proceeds that we collect on this merchandise to the scholarship fund that we are creating. And then we also have a GoFundMe that will be listed in the show notes of our YouTube show and our podcast. And you guys can click on it and you can donate any amount you'd like. And all of the proceeds from that are going to go ahead and go to the scholarship fund. And we'll be showing you exactly how the money is distributed, how it's collected. We're going to be very transparent with this. We're working with some amazing professionals that from like Cheryl from the Cold Case Institute, Stephen David Lampley from the Oliphant Institute, the leading death investigator, Joseph Scott Morgan. So we're working with all of them to really show how much love wins over everything and bringing peace to a country that we really need it right now. So that's what we're doing. And we're going to go ahead and play our entries at the top of every podcast and every YouTube until we choose a winner. And our special guests that we have each week, the different people that come on and are here with us, Cheryl and Stephen and Joseph, they'll all be a part of choosing that lucky winner or winners, depending on how much we end up getting donated. So I hope that you guys join us in #LoveWins. And we hope that we get some really great entrants because we really want to see how you lead with love.
Thanks so much for tuning in and dishing true crime with the Good Wives and Murder by Design. Don't forget to join our Patreon member club to get exclusive mini episodes, inside documents and pictures from the case, live YouTube discussions, our exclusive discussion group on Facebook, and get some amazing Good Wives merchandise.
And follow us on Twitter and Instagram at True Crime Wives. And for more inside information, check out our podcast, The Good Wives Guide to True Crime, on any of your favorite podcast players.
Have a good one from The Good Wives, serving up true crime one dish at a time.